And the pain was just overwhelming me. And the day was so beautiful, and the sun and the sky and the robins were singing. And I remember looking back at the house and going, should I go back and give up?
Jackoline, how did you find Carnivore?
Thank you for asking this question to everybody. And just like so many other people you've interviewed, and they say, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. So many of the interviews you've given, I can only watch so many because eventually I start crying. And so we really do appreciate it a lot. And everybody out there who's watching, I think there's a bond and a connection that's occurring when people like myself who've had a really serious, kind of by traditional means not a curable condition. So how I found it is a slightly different journey. So what happened to me after I had my second child, I got very ill and I had lots of infections, and they put me on multiple heavy antibiotics. And after 1 year, all of a sudden I had a very acute autoimmune reaction, and they diagnosed me with lupus. And it immobilized my entire right arm and my feet up to my knees, and it was acute. And I had two young children. For So the first 3 months I literally was crawling on hands and knees, and then crutches, and I was really afflicted for 2 years. And then I kind of adapted to the pain, and then they gave me these heavy aspirin based painkillers that kind of caused damage, like internal bleeding. So I had to just take a little tiny piece just to take the edge off the pain. And so then they sent me to specialists and everything. And they wanted to give me cortisone shots. And I knew that wasn't actually an answer. And I actually thought I was going to go to these specialists and they were going to say, oh, do this and this and this, and you will heal. And then the one specialist said, oh, well, you're lucky you're walking. If you were a little bit older, you'd be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, so kind of like count your lucky stars kind of approach, right? So then, now the internet, this was almost 30 years ago. And so the internet, there wasn't really anything. And so I just started looking about the immune system. So I found just two little things that I thought, well, I can do this. So one was always sleep when I was tired, because our body heals and regenerates. So my husband agreed, and I would sleep long, many hours, and nap. And then the other one was eat as fresh as you can, like clean, unadulterated foods, simple foods. So then, because I started learning about like food allergies, because I was really naive and didn't understand anything about my immune system. So I had, cut out like potatoes and things like that, and I knew about keto. I knew about that. And so I thought losing weight would help me walk, because from being pregnant, you always gain weight. So then my husband, because then I got a little bit hopeful, because I thought, oh well, I could grow a garden and and provide my own food. And so my husband built me these about nine. They're just were 4 feet by 4 feet garden boxes, and he made the garden very close to the back door, like 20 feet. And so he had taken the children out, and I had got these special foamy shoes to try to walk, because it was so difficult for me to walk. I could have got one of those disabled cards to put in my vehicle, because wherever I went, people immediately were opening the door for me, because I kind of had to tiptoe on my feet, and the muscles in my arm shrank as if I had had a cast on it. Like my right arm, like I couldn't lift a spoon. Like I cannot, the level of pain, I'm sure a lot of people watching will understand. At one point in time, I remember waking up from a nightmare that I was being tortured in a medieval dungeon and my limbs were being put in a coal fire and I was being burned alive. And the pain was so great, it was even penetrating into my sleep, into my dreams. So it was really bad. So anyways, so then I got hopeful about my garden, which got me to go outside. And so this one day, because I had planted and I wanted to go out and it had rained, but my feet were hurting so bad, so bad. And I was like, okay, well, I'll put on these special soft shoes. And I got halfway across the deck. And the pain was just overwhelming me. And the day was so beautiful, and the sun and the sky and the robins were singing. And I remember looking back at the house and going, should I go back and give up? Or should I go forward? And I thought, well, maybe if I take my shoes off and my socks off, I'll be able to walk even more gently, because it was the impact. It was just the impact. So I did, and I tiptoed into the garden and opened the gate, and the soil was black in the path. And so I had my bare feet. And what happened is what is the miracle, the beginning of the miracle. So when I laid my feet on the ground and I was looking at my feet, this sensation of a trickling, it was so subtle, and it was going down my body, out my feet. And what happened was, this was the first moment where I recall the pain stopped. It stopped. And I was like, and it went out my feet. So I think that has to do with grounding, because I didn't know anything about grounding then. And so now that was the beginning. And so whatever allowed that to happen triggered what they consider a spontaneous remission. Yeah. And so then my garden, I was very weak because I hadn't hardly been able to walk for 2 years. And so my husband, he was just so supportive, and I just appreciate him so much. And anyways, he built the garden for me, and I had this little stool that my left arm wasn't affected, and I'm left-handed, so that was like I couldn't have lived. But I had this little stool, and I could move it around, and I could sit down because I couldn't stand for very long. But it's very therapeutic because I could use it was the first work I could start doing with my right hand, and I could pull little weeds and things. And that was it. And it took me many, many months to build up my strength, and I still have, like, if I get run down or I get tired, like, I'll feel this sort of sensitiveness in my wrist. So I always was aware to be careful to not have it occur again. So then, needless to say, I really fell in love with gardening. And I started to eat copious amounts of high oxalate foods. And then I started having these kidney stone attacks that were off the scale, agonizing pain once again. And I was really confused because, of course, I was worried that it was the lupus. And I, went to the hospital, and my doctor, thank goodness, he said, oh, you don't have the normal kind of kidney stones. He said it's like a crystalline, like sand. And I was like, well, what's causing it? And so then he was the first one who mentioned oxalate substance in plant. He said, well, it's in some plants. He didn't tell me what plants. So then I started to be more careful, and like I was eating, raw parsley and things like that. So then I removed those foods. And then that helped. Okay, but that was always there with me. And so, because you see, something else that's unique about me is I'm Métis. So in Canada, when you are a mixed descent of First Nations, so through my mother, I'm 1/4 First Nations. So I have the DNA of genetics of First Nations people. So then what? So I was definitely improving, and I lost weight. And I was, at that time, I was eating like a lot of chicken and stew and soups, but I was still eating like brassica, which affected my thyroid and it caused some tumors, like benign type of cysts. So I've had every kind, I think, of affliction that is a secondary negative effect from ingesting too many plant foods for my particular genetic disposition. And so then I kind of, I kept reducing. And so my vegetable portion would go down and down. But then, as I got a little bit older, my gallbladder completely almost failed. I came so close to losing my gallbladder. And once again, anyone who's had that, I saved it. Okay. They were going to put me in to have it removed. And this is when, by then, I got books and I was looking at, like alternative naturopath. And I found out low stomach acid was something that can cause someone like myself to not digest starches as well. And so what I learned, it's not fat that was causing my gallbladder to malfunction, but it was that the starches were causing my digestive fluids to be congealed. And that is also next level pain. And it got so bad for 3 months, I literally practically wasn't eating anymore. And I was just drinking bone broth. And it was really close. But again, when I looked up gallbladder removals, 87% of all gallbladders removed in Canada, at least, are from indigenous populations. Yeah, because you see, the First Nations people, especially in Canada, did not have starch in their diet. There was so little starch. There'd be like a narrow window. And the plant foods are normally teas, a lot of medicinal teas. So it's not that the plants aren't used, but they're used more like a medicine. Okay, so then, okay, so here I am, and then I got involved because I was really passionate about food still, even though, because indirectly, the food was teaching me about my body. You see? So it was a hard way to learn, but it really sunk in. And I'm really able to control what I eat because it will make me extremely sick. Okay. And I'm really fortunate to be alive. And so then what happened, I volunteered a lot at a agricultural school up in the north, and we had lots of young people come that would be like vegetarian or vegan. And so I got really exposed to that, and I really can tell the majority of people in that community have a huge heart, and they really care about the natural world and about how animals are treated. But when they seen how I was and how I loved the animals too, I had many vegetarians and vegans eat meat with me because they were confident that this animal had lived truly a good life in a very nature mimicking way, and that died a very humane way. Because animals in the wild, I don't know, most people don't know this, but most prey animals or herbivores are lucky to get to be 2 years old. Yeah, most don't even reach full adulthood because of the predator cycle. Because herbivores, they don't have a mechanism to control reproduction. They'll just reproduce and reproduce. And it's the predators that help keep their population in check. And predators do have a built in mechanism to self regulate breeding. And if there isn't enough food, wolves won't breed. So it truly is a balancing system that's really got out of whack. So, anyways, the joke was they all called me a carnivore when they were referring to, like, they would be cooking supper and it'd be, oh, Jackie or Jacqueline, she's going to eat But she's carnivore. That's what they would call me. But I still ate plants. I didn't, only starch I ate at that time was squash. But everything was grown organically and locally on the farm. Very few foods that I consumed from the store. So you see, what happened is I thought that that was a term that the plant-based community was giving to someone like myself who still fully ate all animal-based foods. Okay, so when I even started to hear about carnivore, I didn't understand it was exclusively animal-based. But then, because of my lupus, I continuously was on the lookout for really good therapies, and I discovered George Wiseman in Canada. He's an inventor, Eagle Research, and he invented a therapeutic Brown's gas machine that you can inhale. In fact, this is very big in Japan, very big. Inhale it, and it's a hydrogen-based therapy, and you can treat your water, and it's a very powerful natural antioxidant. And what is that? His wife died of lupus before, like, it was really established that this Brown's gas could be used as therapy. So then he was saying this was really good for people with lupus. And I was listening, and he was reading these testimonials of people who said, I've been using it and my symptoms have just continuously reduced. So I was like, oh, I want, so needless to say, I invested in one of these machines. But then I kept watching his shows. And then a couple times, depending on I heard the word deuterium and low deuterium water. And I was like, what? What's that? And so that kind of opened up another rabbit hole for me, because then I was really interested in what were they talking about. And that led me to Dr. Laszlo Boros, who is a professor in a university in Amsterdam, and he teaches, I think he even helped create the program, called deuteronomics. So it's a new science, so a biochemical science about how this natural substance is it's not man-made, but even though maybe because of the way we've been treating the earth, we've caused it to be mobilized more in the environment. And so then I started to listen to him. And then I heard him explain 100% he only eats animal fats and meat. And I was like, what? And he was, and so then that led me to, like, these phenomenal, impact on cancer. Like, I mean, honestly, this one book on deuterium depletion, to sum it up, if people add to their regiment, okay, and I think this is why the carnivore diet is helping us so much. Inadvertently, we don't realize, but we're naturally reducing how much deuterium we're ingesting. You see, because my learning has taken to me, what's happened is a lot of with plant breeding and genetic modifying has changed the genes. So plants used to have more mechanisms to filter it out or stop it from, and now it's open, and the deuterium is concentrating at much higher levels in many grains and plant foods. Okay, so we are dealing with, like, we're juggling a whole bunch of balls right now. Okay, and so with that kind of information, right, what really lit me up was when I learned that by adding in, okay, to reduce ingesting deuterium with people that had various types of cancer. So definitely the carnivore diet, all of that would be part of it, or the metabolic therapeutic diet is another way they describe it. But also they will even source a very expensive water, but still, if you're going to possibly die, it's a good investment. And their goal is to get their average ingestion down to like 100 parts per million on average. Okay, so you take everything you ingest and you eat, and your goal is to get this average. 9 million people pass away every year from cancer. And if they included reducing deuterium, 7 million could have remission occur. So the carnivore diet, and now what's significant is the grass fed. There's a big difference. There's a few studies out. The commodity confinement animals, they're not as healthy. They don't get exposure to sunlight a lot of times, and their body tissues will be higher in deuterium. But the more traditional, low density, not, high feedlot concentrations, and natural foliage, the animals, in fact, I believe animal-based fats raised this way have the lowest source of deuterium that can be considered a food for a human being that we can possibly have access to. And so that was just like all that information come together for me. And when I'm listening, I'm like, we are on the precipice of a very significant change. Because you see, when I became so passionately interested in sustainable agriculture, I wanted to really know, is it even possible to feed myself and feed my family? So I poured my intellect into studying that. And yes, we absolutely can. And then I, poured myself into, well, yeah, but what about animals? Because there's so much information that was kind of putting animals down. But what I discovered, I actually went to Africa, to Zimbabwe, to the African Center for Holistic Management, which Alan Savory helped establish. And I was able to learn from them and witness with my own eyes the miraculous transformation of a desertifying area that, without machines and without chemicals, just with people, but changing their relationship with their animals and like the density and the frequency they move, it can have an effect that's very much like a spontaneous remission of desertification. And so, just as miraculous as this healing is in us, the animals are a bridge that we, by this path of healing, we can participate in supporting much greater planetary healing of the ecosystems. And it doesn't take huge investments. It takes knowledge, it takes skill. We need people that have understanding to help mentor and teach other people. And so if you are able to source grass-fed, you are actually supporting our mother Gaia to also heal. And so we got a big journey ahead of us, but I was blessed to be exposed to a lot of brilliant scientists, and because of where I lived, I got included and invited to special seminars. And there's this famous scientist from India. I got to listen. He's a soil scientist, and he actually said it's been calculated, mathematically calculated, okay, that if we make these subtle adjustments and become mindful of the soil, okay, the health of the soil, which also is where the storage of deuterium can go. Okay, so the deuterium, just like CO2, can be drawn out of the environment and stabilized. Okay, he said it would only take 40 years for us, if we just begin to transform the way we are fed and begin to heal the deserts. But it would be kind of like when you got a big, rash you wiped out on your motorcycle. It normally heals from the peripheral. That's how the healing of the ecosystem occurs, it would only take 40 years to actually stabilize CO2 levels while we reverse our relationship with the soil and start building the carbon, which is simultaneously going to help pull the deuterium out of our food, you know? And honestly, like, yes, let's also learn how to make the plant-based foods safer. Let's start breeding programs that reduce the toxicities. Let's learn about that. Like, let's help the plants, because maybe some places where people are, because of desertification, it might be really hard to raise a lot of animals. They can barely stay alive themselves. So this is a complex problem that we're dealing with. But the animal-based agriculture is a positive part of the solution, and their milk. You see, because a dairy animal, so this is really about long-term sustainability. Can we do this? Can we truly support a true carnivore way of living, plant animal based, right? Yes, we can. But dairy could be an important step in learning how to moderate dairy ingestion, right? Because if you have a goat or a dairy sheep, okay, and you eat that goat or that sheep, you might get 40,000 calories, which is quite a lot. And I'm talking eat everything, the skin, all the organs, everything, okay? But that same small dairy animal, if you keep her healthy and you breed her, she might breed for 15 years. And you milk her, you share the milk even, you can get per year 500,000 calories of animal-based fat and protein. And you can render the milk and just extract the butter, and butter's very low in deuterium too. Okay? Now that's food security walking on four legs, because normally an adult man, we would need 1 million calories per year to stay alive. You see? And so, because I know there's so much vilification right now that's against the animals, but really where that's coming from, it's the industrial production, the confinement. That's really where all the problems are. But when we enter into this other relationship with the animals and we care for them because they're actually helping to heal us too, it can be this positive upward building and restoring of vitality, which will directly benefit all of us. And the other beautiful part of this, okay, is a lot of people are starting to, to kind of hate our own species. Like, oh, there's too many humans, we need less. And, there's different degrees of that, right? And I've had lots of these kinds of conversations. And I thought deeply about it. And I had sort of an epiphany because of Alan Savory, okay? Because you could say yes, for the human race to continue on this highly artificial, in techno machine based way of living, that the earth, she can't sustain that. So all those people, right? But the problem of the earth and all the damage, you see, we've only just come to discover how bad it is. We didn't do this on purpose. We didn't know until there were satellites to show us, and archaeology to show, the Sahara Desert is man-made. Most people don't know that. Okay? Okay, but guess what? We need an army of people who love the natural world. And if they all begin to engage, there's enough of us alive right now to be the catalyst for the healing. That's miraculous, that all of what's happened has caused this huge population of people. But for Gaia to really have a serious turnaround, like that 40-year, she needs all of us to participate, you know? And so it's like we don't have to be split between the plant-based diet and the animal-based diet, because maybe there isn't enough animals to even support every human being at this point in time to go full carnivore. So maybe it's more like, okay, well, let's really acknowledge it as a therapy right now, right? And like for me, I think I have just and maybe many people from different ancestry have much greater sensitivities to the plant foods. And that's just a fact. And we know that it can be like an elimination. We know that, we know it, right? And so, like, even if it's acknowledged this is truly a therapeutic healing path, which I am now full carnivore, right? I'm like, like once I was like, oh my goodness, and then I look at my ancestry, like the Dene in the north. A lot of times the people that are vegetarian or vegan, they would ask, well, what would be the plants that the First Nations people would eat? And they would go, "Mm-mm." And normally it would never say. The closest thing would be eating the stomach content of the caribou. When they would eat the lichen, which is a type of symbiotic mushroom, because the caribou would pre-digest it. But that was it. Like, and they were really observing the way the predator and what the predators do. And predators will eat the stomach content of the prey. And so that's very much, and that I didn't tell very many people that, because it's shocking. It's sort of a shock because we become so entrenched with the model. But the truth of the matter is the cultivating of cereals and plant-based annual is actually the most destructive form of agriculture ever. And herbivores and many, many animals don't need to eat grain. They can be fed many types of plant-based foods and help to heal this. And so this is an important part of the story that, I think needs to be told, that healing is possible for our society, for ourself, and for our environment by changing our relationship with our food and bringing in science. And so what what I've kind of been brought to now is I'm part of with a group of private families, and we're initiated our own scientific research project around learning about deuterium, learning how to produce our own food with the lowest attainable levels. Our long-term goal is to actually have our own facility where we can test our foods ourselves, read the readings ourselves. Like, we look at how bad it is, but really we stopped taking responsibility. We stopped making sure the food was safe. We just kept trusting. And now the problem is so immense. The public system will be lucky if it can hold together long enough for us to make these adjustments and not have a massive shock to our food system and have a massive famine. So like, like it's good that it's still holding together, but the future is actually very bright. And right now we're taking samples and we're sending them to Europe. And so what we're trying to do is we're just trying to kind of learn what are the baselines, and we are collecting all the studies to give us reference points. Like certain plants maybe naturally are lower. Sadly, sugars, GMOs, high carbohydrate foods are also high in deuterium, and it has to do with the chemistry. So the metabolic therapeutic diet is very good because it helps protect you from excess deuterium, which you see also one extra step. What I'm doing is, and other families involved in the project are doing this. So like I've linked up with the it's called the Nutritional Healing Center, and Dr. Darren Schmidt. wonderful doctor, love him. And he is a you can order these marvelous tests for toxic any toxins, toxic burden that we might have heavy metals, we might have other viruses, we might have many other things, because part of this equation with the deuterium, what I've learned, because all life has adapted to its presence, including our body. But our body is seeking homeostasis with it. So maybe for a week, maybe we only eat fat and our deuterium level might go really, really low, right? And then we might eat a meal that has high. Well, the body, when it's working and doesn't have hidden toxins, is able to release the excess deuterium. And what is being discovered is there are a lot of the like glyphosates, and a lot of these substances are crippling our body's ability to release the toxins. Okay? And so I feel what's happening right now with this movement for metabolic therapy and the carnivore diet is we are tapping into the way our body actually works to heal itself. And so the other part of the research is we want to learn how to protect ourselves from excess exposure, how to reduce things that may have been built up in our body, and then be careful about what we eat, and then go forward and just keep learning. And we got some retired agriculture people and farmers who are mentoring people that maybe want to, because even if you just stop buying the grocery store food and grew your own garden, you would immediately, even if you don't want to give up plants, okay? Because I understand. I really get it, okay? I love my garden. It healed me, okay? So I really understand. But now I use plants in a very different way, in more of a medicinal way, right? But, we're all different. And so that is, where we are. And I think it's the future. And we have lots to discover. Yeah.
Wow. What a story.
Thank you.
So just to take a step back
Hmm.
to what you suffered through,
Hmm.
how is your arm and how are your legs now?
Oh, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Okay. Like, I marvel. I marvel at how strong I am. Like, even how old I am. Like, I don't look how old I really am. I'm close to 60, right? I'm close to 60 years old, and I guess much younger than that. And like I'm very active. I'm outside all the time. My heaviest when I was pregnant, I was 187 pounds. And I gained a lot of weight. I used to suffer terribly from migraines. And I did definitely discover it's chocolate. I cannot eat chocolate. And so I had bought one of those little no sugar chocolate treats, and boom, instantly I have a migraine, but I don't suffer migraines. And I used to get full blown, like I even had it so that I thought I was having a stroke. Like I had to go to the hospital because I would get such bad migraines. And all of that is 100% better. And I also do a type of weightlifting called katsu, and that is also from Japan. And I find that, and it's just it's called blood flow restriction. And you put a special little band and you can lift weights very, like, it's very gentle. Like it doesn't cause you to be sore and painful, but it really helps to maintain your muscle mass. But yeah, like my vitality now, and I sleep marvelous. And since I went full carnivore, there's another little, I sleep completely sound. And so when I went through menopause, I was having all these hot flashes and waking up and having to go peel. It was just, it's agony, right? Like every kind of affliction. But I also have had an aunt. She passed away, but she had a hormone problem, so she had a little goatee and a mustache. And I was always afraid that that would happen to me. And I used to have a whisker. I have a little scar on my chin. And I used to have like, it was to me, it was like a porcupine quill. It was like a man whisker, right? Oh, and I hated that whisker. And I used to pull. You know what? Because I have to wear glasses to see myself close. And I don't even know. I thought I was going downtown because I don't go to the city very often. I thought, oh, I better look and see if that, it fell out. I started taking iodine and I started taking a little bit of butter at night because of listening to these doctors that are promoting this animal-based diet and they talk about it helping. And those little whiskers I had are gone. They fell out. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I don't get the hot flashes anymore. I sleep through the night, and yeah, like it is like reversing time. You do actually feel like your clock has gone back a few digits. I'm waiting for my eyesight, you know but my glasses, I don't need to keep increasing them in the strength. And it's only for when I need to read little words and I can squint and see. And so yeah. hmm
Nice. And so, day to day, how are you eating?
mm. Well, I very much follow if I'm hungry. And I've because I'm very active, and so sometimes I will have cook a steak at lunch, and which I did, and I'll have it in butter, and I sear it, and then I cut up like the fat, the soft fat, because that was something I had trouble with. Is I did not the texture, slimy texture, and rubbery fat. I didn't like that. So I found I have to cook it. And so I crisp it. So I make little crisps with it. And then I'll eat that. And then sometimes I make a stew. Sometimes we'll whip egg and make us in the winter I make a lot of stewy broth type of meals. And I've been experimenting. I'll show you what I got. Just let me get it. So I have, because I raise goats. So this is an example of my personal stash of dried meat that I make. In this is dried goat and dried lamb. And so this is something I think that some people might enjoy. Is First Nations people, definitely dry meat is a big part of it. But what people don't know is it's used as a chip to eat the fat. And even you see in the wintertime, like you got to realize gathering firewood when you don't have a saw and everything, like even having a fire in the winter was a very choice. It would be sometimes just to melt snow for water. And you cook the fat, but then it gets hard. And so you use the fat, scoop the fat, and use the meat as the chip. Okay? That's what you're doing. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's what I do. And so, and I have a like a 100% salt, and it's delicious. It's and it's just with salt and, and that, yeah. And so, yeah. And that's how, and that, yeah. So it's pretty simple. I'm trying to think what might be different. Oh, a little, and I still eat like a very, very high fat blue cheese, but just, I've been starting to sort of reduce because what happened is I started losing weight really quickly. And I thought, if there was ever like a crisis of a war or something, and there really is a lot of shortages, and I might need to share my food, and it might be a good thing to have 5 or 10 pounds of fat. So I could fast at a time of a crisis, right? And so because I was just like it was just melting off of me. And so then I began to allow myself to eat more cheese. And so what I'm doing right now, because like I say, I do believe that the dairy is a critically important step for us as we make this transition to truly regenerative, healing, animal-based agriculture. And as we breed our animals to build up the population so that we can do this long term, and break the cycle and let the breeding females live 10, 15 years, so you got to kind of, there's these components for us to think about, right? But like if you have a dairy for yourself, your family, that you can make the cheese and the butter, and then the whey or the buttermilk, you can use that to feed your chickens and your pigs. Okay, so then you can get those animals off the commodity feeds, because the commodity feeds are very high in deuterium. And so your animals, you see, the lower the deuterium is for them, because basically what it is every stage of life is a filter for the deuterium. So the microbial life in the soil, small, short-lived, rapidly reproducing organisms love deuterium. Okay, and then the insects, same thing, exoskeleton, they need the deuterium because deuterium helps make things hard and strong. And then it goes up, the reptiles, the amphibians, it goes up, 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 and it's filtering up to us. And it is pretty much known now that we actually evolved and were alive for the majority of the time, most likely in an atmosphere that had 100 parts per million in the rain. Okay, just in the rain. Then it would go into the soil and be further filtered up. So what we were ingesting before the disruption to our environment began thousands of years ago, we might have only been consuming 50 parts per million. So we don't even know. You see, we don't even know. What they do know is we do need we need at least 40 parts per million. It would be a miracle to find an environment where we would only be exposed, because it's in the water vapor we breathe, right? So we don't ever have to worry about not having enough. What we have to deal with is this way too much. And so yeah, that's the real concern. So part of what we're doing within the project we're involved in is all of us are sending samples in from different foods we might want to purchase, and we want to know, because then you see if we're not well, because right now we don't know what are the true values in our food. But once you have a reading, you can say, oh, this food's got 110. Okay, this food, oh, this food's 140. Oh, but if I put those two together, the average will be 120. So, okay, you see, but we need the data. And so we're going to compile it into a publication that will show all the levels and the different methods, different growing techniques, different systems that might reduce the quantities. So I think this will be like something that we do in time as a species. Like it's huge what this is. And yeah.
Yeah. So, how can people get in touch with you or find out more about this project?
Well, I have a website, and it's if you just Google my name, JackalineMillen.com, it'll bring you right to it. And my family, we founded a private members association, which is the nickname is called a PMA, to be able to facilitate families that are wanting to help each other and cut through all the red tape, because there's a lot of different, and just really meet each other where we're at and support each other and share knowledge and information. And there's room for more people. There's actually members, we have quite a few members spread around the world. We've been kind of doing this going on a few years, and we're really, yeah, it's going well. And I think it's a one more component that can help us implement and support the carnivore diet to really be sustainable long term. So nobody, let's make it so anyone who wants to choose this way of eating can have access to the food, whether they raise it themselves, if that's the only way they can afford, and know and share the information and help each other and get well and not feel guilty about it. Because there's a lot of guilt, but I love my animals. I really do. And yeah, so, and they, you know, they don't live forever. And so it's like, if I could close with this, because I am a raised Christian and my faith has carried me a long way. Okay. And I reflected on that account where God said to Adam, "From dust you are, to dust you shall return." And now that I've learned so much about the soil, I thought, well, maybe if we return to the soil and return our attention to the soil and we take care of the soil, maybe we don't have to become dust quite so quickly, you know? Because I think there is a lot that probably we're not even really meant to die this quickly. If we were really living in a truly healthy ecosystem, it we might, who knows what's in store for recovery and healing.
Hmm.
Mm, yeah.
So you're saying that Cheerios and Fruit Loops might not be extending our life?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is a big no-no. And I sadly just heard in the United States they've approved wheat to be genetically modified to be sprayed with glyphosate, and that will automatically uh, just open up the gene pathways to allow more deuterium to concentrate in wheat. And basically, a human, anyone who, if your body can't release it anymore and your levels get to be over 150, 155, it's almost always you have an acute, potentially fatal diagnosis of some kind. Like deuterium and chronic illness are wed together. And so I just think that that's like an unknown blessing of the carnivore diet.
Jacqueline, I'll link to your website below.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I feel honored to be here, and I look forward to all those future interviews too that make me cry. Thank you.